Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, let me start this Ksuvas daf Chav Ches. We are going to begin on the bottom of Chav Zayin Amud Beis by the Mishnah. Rav Zachariah ben Akatziv. Now he happened to be a Kohen, and he said Hamoin Hazeh. Rashi says this is a shvua that he sweared the lo zazi yadi mitoich yadi, that literally her hand was not removed from my hand. From the time that the Chachamim entered into Yerushalayim, yad shiyatzu, until they left. In other words, she was certainly not defiled, and therefore there's no reason why she should not be able to be with me. So is this acceptable testimony? So Amru Lo, they said to him, Ein Adam Me'ed Al Atzmo. So even though it's not himself, but because he's talking about his wife, and therefore that will have implications, halakhic implications, that he will not be able to be with his wife, so therefore he's not allowed to testify for her. Tana. Now, the Afal Pikain, even though Rashi says she'asr that she's going to be ushered to him because he's a Kohen, yi'achid la bayis bechatzero, she could seclude herself in his courtyard because she yatsa b'roish yatsa, when she goes out, yatsa b'roish b'neha, she should go out in front of her sons because she nichneses, when she enters, nichneses b'sopana, she should go after them. So this way she was never alone with him. So that is something which is acceptable. So boy abaya mahu lasos bigurusha, can she live near you in the chutzner when it comes to a divorce? So hasam who dibishvuya hikilu. Maybe the reason why we're lenient, as we just mentioned, is because we're dealing with a woman who's in captivity, and we're generally lenient when it comes to that. But when it comes to grusha, when a person divorces his wife, you should not live in her neighborhood. And this is going to be question TB 13, which asks the following. It says, if one has to move, who moves out? And the question also is going to be Madu. So he says like this. Again, if a person divorces his wife, you're not allowed to live in the same neighborhood. It says Rashi Lafi Shemakir B'Rimizaisav Shemi Yavoli the Avera. Because even though they obviously don't love each other because they got divorced, but they still had a relationship, and therefore we kind of want them to keep their distance. As we continue to if let's say he was a Kohen, even if they weren't not married, lo toder imo b'mavoy, should not even live with him in a mavoy. It says Rashi, because shema yavo leha v'kohen as begrusha, and a Kohen is not allowed to be with a gerusha of Yisrael. Kolzman shel nises, as long as he's not married, toder b'shchunasai, he can live in the same neighborhood. So then the Gemara says like this. Im kfar katan. What if it's a tiny little village? Zeh hayamaisa. This actually happened. V'yomer kfar katan nidain kishchuna. That a small village has the same din as a shchuna, and therefore a person who is megarshis ishto should not live in even a small village together. So mi nidchem imnei mi. So this was the question that was just posed at TB 13. So which of the two have to leave? So the Gemara says like this: Tashma the Sanya he nidches mipana ve'ein hu nidcha mipaneha. So she is pushed off from him, and he is not pushed off from her. That's. But what the question is, what if she's the actual owner of that property? So then hu nidcha mipaneha? Then he has to leave. Iboilhu haisa chatzer shel shneim. The question is, what if both of them own it? What if they both have equal ownership? Mahu. So who leaves? Tashma. He nidches mipanav. So in this situation, again, she also leaves. But my skin. What is this talking about? If it's talking about it's his courtyard pshita, then obviously she leaves. But so maybe it's talking about hers. No, if it's her chatzar, then he leaves. So it must be proof that it's talking about this particular situation. That when it comes to that they both have ownership, so the din is that he has to leave. So therefore, this is a raya that when it comes to a gerusha, maybe we're not as lenient. And we're saying, no, Dilma de Agar Megar. Maybe we're talking in a situation where it was only a rented property and not talking about that it was actually purchased. So my Havala. So what's the maskan regarding this? So Tashma, the pasuk says in Yeshaya, Hine Hashem mitalelcha, that Hashem will move you away. Taltela gaver, the movement of a man. The Yamarav till Tuli the gaver kashin mid isasa, that the movement of a man is harder than a woman. Therefore, that's what it's referring to. And therefore, according to this, let's see the answer when it says TV 13. He says that he nidchas mipanav, she leaves. Menisha teltuli gaver kashin mid isasa. Something to think about, that for a woman, I guess typically when a lot of times when women get married, certainly then they would move to wherever the husband's job is or whatnot. So therefore, a woman may be used to moving. So therefore, if she leaves, it's not the biggest deal. But for a man, he's more rooted, maybe for business and things of that nature. So therefore, it's more devastating for the man to have to move. Tanabanan. Lava himena. Let's say the husband borrowed money from her, b'nichse aviyah, and it's her father's possession. So ein nifras ele alidei acher. He should only pay back through someone else. So again, because they're divorced, so they shouldn't come close when it comes to these matters. If they actually come in front of us to court, lo mizdakinon luhu, we're not going to pay any attention to them. We're not going to pay attention to them. Rav Papa Omer Shamuti Mishamtina Lahu. Actually, we would put them into cherem. We would put them into a form of excommunication for acting in this manner. We would even give them lashes. That again because of the way that they're behaving. Rav Nachman Tana Be'evel Rabasi. It was learned in Evel Rabasi. Rashi says it's a Masechta, and it's called actually Karnois Samachais Bezuhi Mishnah Rishayna. This is its first Mishnah. Hagoses Harihu Kachai L'chol Davarav. That in Goses, someone who's dying in certain regards, in all matters rather, he's considered like he's alive. So it says like this. B'medimo Murim, when do we say that he has the same status of being someone like alive? That's Shiniz Garshim and Nesuin. That if he was divorced from Nesuin, Abel Shiniz Garshim and Erison, if let's say they only got divorced from Erison, Nifras Ali Atzma, Shin Libo Gaspa. So the only time it's an issue is if they already married, which means they had Bia multiple times. So now we want them to stay away from each other. And therefore, when you pay back, you should only do it Ali De Acher. However, if it's a situation where you got divorced after Erison, so therefore you didn't have that intimate relationship with one another, and therefore it's not as big of a deal. We're not as concerned. Hahu Oris were Sasai. So there's a story of an Oris and Sasso, and this Oris was actually a Kohen. The Usul Kamei the Rabbi, he went in front of Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Adam Rava Kamei. He went in front of him. Oki Rava Shlucha Binetayu, and they put a shliach in between them, which again is questionable because it's Erison we just established. So you don't need that. It's not necessary. So Malay said, well, actually we do. I see the way that they're conducting themselves with one another. I recognize their hints, their winkings, and the like, that they are actually closer than a typical situation. He did not put a shliach between them. Is what you're supposed to. You don't need to. I think you should. Why? I can see that they are a little bit too friendly with one another. So let's now see the next Mishnah. The following is a list of people that can testify once they're an adult, even though what they saw things when they were a kid. So they can't testify when they were a kid, but once they're older, they can testify on that which they saw. And this is going to be primarily Dini Durabanan. Neman Adam Oimer Zek Sav Yado Shel Abba. The person can say, this is my dad's signature. Zek Sav Yado Shel Rebbe. Zek Sav Yado Shel Achi. this is my Rebbe's signature, this is my brother's signature. If you get enough F's on a report card, you have to have your parents' signature, so a kid sees it enough and he can recognize it. So he can do that for court as well, to be Mekayim a star based on this testimony. And I also know, and I can verify, this woman is a Basul, and therefore she should be entitled to Ksuba of Masayim of 200 Zuz, because I saw her going out with this Hinuma, with this special covering, or her hair was uncovered, which is only for a Basula. I also saw this kid, this guy, he went out of school, and he immersed himself and he ate Truma. So that would be enough to establish that this person is actually a Kohen. We'll see what type of, maybe it's only Truma de Rabbanan. He was dividing among the silo. And this is a base of pras, in which we'll see exactly what that is. We'll discuss it more later on, even though it's discussed in many places in Shas. The Adkan, until here, Hainu Boyim B'Shabbos. This is the Tchum Shabbos. L'chayr means to do Rabbanan. You can't say this is a path that, even though it goes through someone's property, to be able to say, oh yeah, no, there's actually someone else's path, and he's entitled to have that path. No. And there was a Maimid or a Hesped in this particular location. They're not believing regarding that either. Okay. So Rabbi Yoshua, Gadol Imoy. So it says the only time we're actually going to allow him to testify is if there's also a Gadol together with him that also saw these signatures. We need all these cases. The Yashmin and Aviv, the father, Misham Deshlechabe, he's by his dad. Of a Rabbi lo, even your teacher, you don't see your teacher's signature as much. Yashmin and Rabbi Misham Deis le a Masa de Rabbi. Since there is an element of fear that you have for your teacher, so therefore because of that, you're not going to testify unless you're definitively 100% sure that this is a signature of lo. But even though you're supposed to fear your father, but a person doesn't as much as their teacher. So they have each one a certain quality. Of your brother, you're not always around your brother, and also you're not afraid of your brother to the same extent as your Rebbe. So maybe testifying for your brother's signature is not good. Since it's only din Rabbanan, establishing the star, so because the star midaraisa, we say it's acceptable. You have Adim on the star, it's showing up. Kim stars is only din Rabbanan. So therefore we're going to allow this to take place because we're only dealing with dini de Rabbanan. Okay. On this, let's see one question over here, I believe. We have question... So question 3 we saw. TA 12. Matai gadol neman loimer. When is an adult able to say Zek sav yade shel abba kishra b'kadnus? So he said that's only in gadol med imoy. It has to be that he has also someone else testifying together with him. He's not believed by himself, but rather he also needs someone else to testify together with him. That's TA 12. So now the Gemara continues and says that one other thing was that Zachar hi yisiba plainis shiatz behunama b'resha perua. I know that she's a basul. So my time, as we established, most women when they get married they're basulos anyway. So therefore, gilu milsa b'almahu. It's something which eventually is going to come out anyway, and therefore he doesn't really need edus to begin with. Therefore, because of that, we will listen to him. How do we know this is true? Maybe he's an Eved Kohen. It doesn't establish that he's a valid Kohen. So Messiah Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, also Adam Shilamin as Abdoi Tayra. A person is not allowed to teach his servant Torah. Velo, is that true? If a person borrows money from his slave, Rabo Oshos, so his master borrows money from his slave, which in itself is hard to understand how that's possible. She also Rabo, as we continue to Chesem and Beis, or his teacher, the master, makes him an apitripus as a guardian to watch over his possessions. Shehiniach tefillin b'bnei Rabo, or he was wearing tefillin in front of his master. And here's the important part over here that we need to establish. Another possibility is shikar shloshim psukim bebeis achnesas. You see that this person's reading 3 psukim in a shul. Harizel yatzel lecherus. So we say that he does not go free. Says Rashi, "Shamina mina diesh eved shalom etayra." The key is the fact that he can read 3 psukim. It shows he's still an eved, and therefore you could teach Torah to an eved. No hasam the ikri eved medaitai. That's talking about where he read by himself. Ki kamrin de konag be minhag bonim. When we're talking about is where he actually acts comparable to a child, to one of his children, and that much you're not allowed to do. So if he decides to read from a Beis Achnesas, that's not a raya. But for you to actually sit down and conduct and learn with him, that much we're not going to do. So again, it's b'truma d'Rabbanan. So he said that he was dividing in the silo. Same question. Tanan keman. The Omer in Cholkin Trumul Evid El Imkin Rabbi Imoy. So as we had before in Masechtas Yevamos, that the only time an Evid is able to divide is dafka in a situation where his master's with him. The Sanya. In Cholkin Trumul Evid El Imkin Rabbi Imoy. Divur Rabbi Yehuda, which must be the Shita, because the fact that we're saying that this is enough to be able to elevate him as a Kohen, it must be, you're not going to think that he can potentially be an Evid Kohen. Rabbi Yosi Omer Yochel Hu Shiermer Im Kohen Ani Tenuli B'Shvil Atzmi. He can always say, if I'm a Kohen, give it to me because of me. If Eved Kohen Ani Tenuli B'Shvil Rabbi. If not, then give it to me because of my master. So Bim Koimishor Rabbi Yehuda, in the place of Rabbi Yehuda, where again an Eved was not able to divide unless the master was with him, Hoyimalin Mitrumul Yochsen. The reason is because based on the giving truma, that's enough to establish that this person is actually a valid Kohen, because there's no one. Normally, an Eved would have to be with his master. So if the Eved is, if this person is doing it by himself, it must be a raya that in fact he's not an Eved Kohen, he's just a regular Kohen, and therefore that would be proof that he can also be elevated to the status of being able to be marrying Yochsin to high pedigree. Therefore he didn't care. Even if he was eating truma, that's not going to be a raya that he's going to be elevated Yochsin. Tanya Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yosim Yomai. In all my days, lo he adti, I never testified. Pamachas, however, one time, I did testify, and I ended up making a slave into a Kohen, which perhaps means that I probably should have stuck to my original philosophy of not being so quick to testify, because the one time I testified incorrectly, or you could actually read it in the way, is because I did this and not want to testify anymore. We know that Hashem doesn't cause even a takala, as we see, as Rashi brings down the Gemara in Chulin Dav Zayin of the Chamor shel Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, that even the donkey of Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair didn't eat from that which was tevel, which was untithed, and it's an animal. So certainly Hashem's not going to cause a takala. And Taisa says regarding food in numerous places when it comes to tzaddikim themselves. So how is it shaykh, which is again this akasha because it's not really talking about food, how is it shaykh to even think that he actually elevated him? Ella bikshu lalos eved l'kuhuna api. I actually wanted to. Chaz b'asar Rabbi Yosi, and I saw in the city of Rabbi Yosi v'oz v'yasid b'asar Rabbi Yehuda, and I ended up testifying in the city of Rabbi Yehuda again, because depending on where the city is, that is going to be the problem of whether or not there's the potential of being Mala Mitrumul Yochsen. And this is question TB14. Mehem hastadim b'machloikis im cholken trumul eved b'loy rabbi. What exactly is the basis for this machlokas? Whether or not we're going to divide truma even if it's not in front of the master. So he said, because it all is totally on what you hold when it comes to Malan Mitrumul Yochsen. Then Rabbi Yehuda was concerned because he held Malan Mitrumul Yochsen. However, the place of Yosi, lo hayamal matrimul yilsin, so to him it did not matter. And then the Gemara says as follows: So when it comes to a besa pras, in which, as the Gemara discussed in many places, there's a shaykh that there's a kever, or there's a mace, but in order to be matama b'oil, it's necessary to have rov minyan, shedra, gilgailus. However, in this event, because it's been trampled and plowed and it's been moved around, we're not concerned with that. But we do have the concern of a bone which is the size of a kadasha, the size of a barley seed, and it's not going to be it's not matama b'oil, but it can be matama b'mag b'masa. And therefore, let's say a bone gets stuck on your pants cuff or somehow, and you end up moving it, so it's tumas mais. So that's a concern in Rabbanan. So my time, because based across the Rabbanan, because the whole concept is the Rabbanan. Yom Rabbi Yehuda or Shmuel, it must be the Rabbanan because we see two tremendous leniencies. Menapeach adam beis hapras v'hoyel. A person literally could blow by beis hapras and go. In other words, all you need to do is just make sure the area right in front of you is fine, which is a huge cool. Rabbi Yehuda bar Ami mishmei Rabbi Yehuda Aimer beis hapras shenidish tahar. Also, it was plowed, and therefore it's understood probably it's not even the size of a barley seed anymore, of a mace, therefore it's tar. So my time, it's impossible that the bone of a barley seed was not threshed by the foot. That's actually machlokes, where the tchum is the rice the rabbanon. We see many times since the Shabbos. So if we're establishing that this is a din that only believing like din in rabbanon, it must be that tchumim is the rabbanon. The ein neman oimer, however, is not believed to say derech hayil pointing by makom hazeh or my b'de misbet hayil pointing by makom hazeh. So my timer, why is he not allowed to say about a path or these different things? Because afukim amoinu l'mafkinan, he's not going to be believed in order to be able to have someone's monies removed. That he won't be able. Tanu Rabbanan neman hatinik oimer, a child is believed to say, and Rashi says lahayid begoidlo, like our Mishnah said, when he gets older, what he saw when he was a kid. Kachameli Abba, this is what my dad said. Mishpacha zu tahara, mishpacha zu tameya, tahara tameya. What does that mean? You heard your parents speaking about someone's tummy. Tahara ella mishpacha zu kshera, mishpacha zu psula. And l'chayra, based on that, you have nemanas. Ikushachanu b'katsatsa, and when I was eating b'katsatsa, the Gemara is going to explain what that is later on. Shel bas ploini l'ploini of such and such a person. Shahinu moilichin chala. He would give out chala matanas l'ploini kayin to this particular guy. Alidi atzma avolo alidi acher. He would do it himself, but not through others. Or kuan. What if, let's say, you have an ovid kachabim, and then he converts, or an Evan Minishtacher. Let's say he was an Evan, he saw something, or Ger when you saw, you were not Jewish when you saw something, and you converted, became free, and Neman. In that situation, not believe it. Ein Neman Loimer Derech Hayil appointed by Makom Hazeh, establishing what our Mishnah said, you can't say this is the path, or Maven Misbar Hayil appointed by Makom Hazeh, that there was a eulogy in this particular place. Rabbi Yochanan Brocha Eimer Nemanim. Actually, it's not true. They are believed according to him. Rabbi Yochanan Baroikahe. So what does he say that they're believed? He's disagreeing with the entire statement we just mentioned? No. How is it possible that he's going to argue with our Mishnah? First of all, he's not mentioning our Mishnah, but even more than that, it's a situation of removing money. Removing money, this would not be acceptable. Ella Arasha. So he doesn't argue about the safe of our Mishnah or the safe of this brisa. He's arguing about the case of the ratio. The kulam. Im hayu oiv kacham and iskayer eved nishtacher eno nemon. Rabbi Yochanan ben Brocha eno nemonim. So they're actually arguing again. If you have someone who's an oiv kacham and converts, or someone who's an eved and then is freed, so is he able to testify now based on what he saw from before? So b'may kimifli Tanakam Savar. Why are they not believed? Kivan de b'kachavim who, since he wasn't Jewish, lo havi dayik. He probably wasn't really so particular and careful in what he was looking at. However, Rabbi Yochanan broke it because, after all, he knows he's never allowed to testify. Eventually, he decides to convert, but at the time, he was probably not so careful. Rabbi Yochanan broke it. No, The truth is, he in his mind was thinking, I'm going to convert one day, and then because of that, he is medayik on these things. So my ketzatza. So we mentioned in this statement something about that there was a ketzatza. So what is that? Tanrabanan ketza ketzatza. Echem eno achin shenasi isha. There's one brother that married a woman, sheinu hogeneslo, and she was actually not really befitting. So boyin b'nei mishpacha. So the family came. Mavin chavis moleya peiros. They took a big basket or big barrel filled with fruits. The shayvenoisa be'emser chava, and they basically broke the barrel and poured it all over the street. The oimrim, and they said, Achenu beis Yisrael shimu achenu ploini nasi isha she'en hogeneslo. So just like you're going to be producing fruits which are improper, so too this is what we do as well to publicize this. Umisyarim anu, we're concerned. Shemis arim zar b'zarenu, that maybe his children will commingle with our children. Boy ukhulachem dugma l'dairos, which is why we're going to make this os and simon as a zikaron for all future generations to remember. Shoyis arim zarim zarenu, that we should not mix with them. So if a child would see this, this is obviously quite a remarkable thing to observe. So therefore, that's something in which, in fact, he would be believed to testify about when he gets older. And we will continue with Elon Narashesh Len Kanas. These are the Nairos in which there is a din Kanas in tomorrow's Daf.